ECWA legend Mozart Fontaine joining us on the line, fresh off of the ECWA reunion show. You look great, man.
Thank you.
You've been working out these last couple of months, or what?
I have. So I told the story. I saw a bunch of the guys I hadn't seen, and some were probably pushing 15 years, maybe. And I
Okay.
came in as lean as I've ever been. I think I went to the doctor like 2 weeks ago, and I weighed in at 177 pounds, right?
Oh my
And I'm
goodness.
looking in the mirror, and I'm like, I don't look, 177 pounds. I look, closer to two. And I was like, all right, well, the scale must be right. This is the doctor's office. It's a legit scale. And I was telling the guys, I've been training at there's a fitness center called 9 Rounds Fitness. It's like a national franchise, but they're independently owned, obviously, as franchises are. So we have one up the street, and uh, Sheriff says to me about a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago, why don't you come down to this gym? And I wasn't working out; I was doing everything at home. Like, oh, I'm good. I'm going to do it at home. So,
Mm-hmm.
you got to come check this out. And it's kickboxing based, 30 minutes in and out, which is right up my alley because I don't have a lot of time anymore. And the cardio, it's just so intense. And they do enough body weight and weight work in between the rounds that I've, been able to keep like a decent physique. Now, my arms are a lot smaller than they used to be. My shoulders hurt, but yeah,
Okay.
that was my secret. I knew about a year ago that I wanted to do some more in-ring work, and I knew I was terribly out of shape in terms of like aesthetically and more importantly cardiovascularly. I never like to be a guy who can't breathe when I'm in the ring. And funny story from the other night, the
Yeah.
adrenaline was going really, really hard, and I had, you know, Captain Clutch, Chris Rockwell, who I think the world of him, his work, him as a person, and his backyarder group. These guys are just great guys, and they're just laying it in on me, beating the crap out of me, and they roll me in the ring, and I'm breathing real heavy, and I get up in the corner, and I'm like breathing, breathing, breathing. And I stopped and thought to me, I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't even a long match. Like, why are you've trained for this? And all of a sudden, like it was like a placebo effect because you're in the ring and you're supposed to
Yeah.
be tired. You're tired, and I was like, wait a minute, I trained for this. Like, I'm not even like I've done nothing yet, And then all of a sudden, like it just the breathing just regulated and stopped, and I felt like $1,000,000. And I'm like, I I just had my 52nd birthday, and I'm like, I can't even believe like I can do this still. So
Wow.
yeah, so funny
And he
story.
looked great.
Thank
He looks
you.
amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
I saw some of the pictures and I was like, wow, normally I hate seeing pictures of myself, and I looked and I was like, I fully understand that some of the folks, like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and everybody that performed came in looking fantastic. They all took it seriously. Everybody came really ready to go and in shape. And I thought to myself, at my age, I don't look half bad. I feel like I can do this a little bit longer, so it's cool.
Mozart, I'm
No, very.
serious. There were some guys I could not even figure out who the heck they were.
Yeah. It was, so I didn't recognize, Dazzling Donnie Love. Frank, he was, his beard was white, and he
Yep.
completely looked different and I hadn't seen him since Jim was running St. Matthews, and that was like 2004. We left that building and went to the boys club where we were at the other night.
Wow.
So I hadn't seen him probably since then, and I didn't really recognize him. So I didn't recognize Ravishing Ronnie Roberts. I was having a conversation with him like I'm his best friend, and then it dawned on me who he was. And I had never met Ronnie back in those days. I'd always got to watch him as he was, pioneering the Super 8, and I'm, just coming on board doing. I don't even think I was doing ring crew yet at the time. I think I was watching Jim and the guys edit the TV show at the time, and I thought he was great.
I didn't
And
recognize Johnny Max.
John, and I was really close with John back in the day, and I walked right up to John, and I had no idea who he was for a minute too, and then I looked
Yeah.
at his face, I'm like, oh, okay, hey man, how you doing?
Well, the
A lot of
funniest thing
people.
was until they announced Brandy was there and they gave
Yep.
her the award. Chris Daniels is standing right next to her. And when they gave her the award, Chris went, "Oh my God, Brandy!"
You know what? I heard that, and she said, and in true Brandy fashion, I think an F word came out.
Exactly.
And I feel like I'm like, how do you not recognize Brandy? Like, she's hardly changed to me.
No.
You know, I mean, her hair was a little shorter than she used to keep it, but other than that, really not much different. She still looked great, you know. I tried to get her.
Well,
I couldn't get her, Kathy. I was trying to get her all leathered up and walk out with the chick magnets, but she wasn't going for it.
well, I know, like from my perspective, right? So like, I was really disappointed that I wasn't able to make the show because there were so many guys that I haven't seen in probably 10 to 15 years, at least. And so it was really kind of bittersweet for me. But from everything I hear, it was like it had that same feel as if like nothing had ever changed. What did it feel like to kind of step in the ring there again?
It was a really emotional day, and if I can walk you through, it started for me
Sure.
on Friday because it got real. Um, Mike Tobin and his wife Jessica, she's just gorgeous, a wonderful person. They're I knew they were coming to stay with us, and we were making the plans to have them come into town. And Jim had approached me a while ago about doing some pickups at the airport, and I was like, of course, I know all these guys. So it was surreal for me. I picked up Loki at the airport, and we spent basically most of the day, the afternoon and early evening Friday, just talking about life and wrestling. And again, I've been doing this for 26 years, and he just completely took me to school in a good way. Not, I mean, he completely took me under his wing, and we talked about life philosophy, seeking truth, being peaceful within yourself,
Yeah.
the aspect of the work that we do, what it means to be out in front of the crowd. So I get him settled in and get him to the hotel, and then I'm meeting up with Mike. I met Mike Tobin here in Delaware. I actually live, I mean, like 2.5 miles, I think it is, from the boys club where we performed. I met him there because he's a little bit familiar with the area, but I was just going to take him to the house from there. And I walk in, and I see the stage setting, and again, I was prepared for all this, I thought, because I've been talking to Jim quite often, and I always did, but of course more so now that we were coming up on this event.
Mhm.
And I knew about he wanted to surprise Ryan with the the old school entrance ways that he used to use with the dual entrance ways, the
Yeah.
face heel entrance ways, and the old black and yellow logo. And I walked in, and it was all set up, and I, I felt like the first time I walked in the building, there was this excitement, and I overlooked so many people. Not necessarily because I didn't recognize them, because I was just enthralled with like the setup, the staging, the production, and the look of it. But when we got to the building the next day, I did a couple of more. I picked a couple of guys up at the airport. It was Scoot Andrews. I picked up Mega, and I had to grab Loki on the way down. So the I've traveled with all of them at some point, but
Yeah.
not ever together. So that was kind of surreal. It was like this just great like brotherhood vibe. Scoot I knew the least, but we still have met and knew each other. Megan and I were like, he was like my big brother for years. I mean, he would come to the shows and, hey, I got these ideas. Like, even if he wasn't in the match, he would be thinking about what the chick magnets could do. And he'd always pull us aside and have something really, I used to call him like the finish master, because he's like, what are you guys doing for the finish? Do you have an idea? I had an
Mhm.
idea, and I was talking to Tobin and blah, blah, and he would always have something cool, and we'd usually incorporate it in, if not just flat out use it. So he was one of those guys that I kind of always looked up to, and as a big brother, although his size, probably made that too. But I'm probably older, but still,
Yeah.
we had all, so we get to the building, and just walking in, I mean, the flood of I couldn't even process it until the end of the night. It was like when the night was over, and I was reaching out. I remember reaching out to Cher, and she says, you guys, you have to go out with the guys. You got to go out and hang out with the guys. And I was, yeah, no, I fully intend to. And it was just like this flood of emotions. I was like, I can't believe like today, and that it wasn't even that I didn't think I could perform. I had no issues with being in the ring, or I wouldn't have done it. Um, Rockwell was the guy. I had asked for him months ago. He was likewise like, hey, I think he wanted to do some work with Cheetah Master, which he actually did get to do. And Cheetah Master didn't do a full full-on match. But I said, months ago, I said to Ryan and Jim, hey, if he's set on working with Cheetah Method, and he has to, because there's really, and I've said this a couple of times to the guys in the back, and I really do mean this, to me, it's my personal opinion, not since the old days of, I don't know, maybe a Ricky Steamboat, has somebody been that good of a baby face. I don't, and people say, well, but Hulk Hogan. And I said, well, no, Hulk Hogan had a marketing machine behind him, and that was intended, and it was supposed to happen. And I'm not taking anything away from him, because he was really amazing at it. But Cheetah didn't have the marketing machine. He had Jim behind him.
Yeah.
And Jim just laid down the canvas and said, just do what you do. And I'd never been to buildings that were that loud, with even those small amount of people that we would gather, which wasn't small for an independent show, but compared to the big arenas, you couldn't even talk to the person next to you sometimes. It was so loud. So I told him that. Mike and I are good friends. We've become good friends over the years. We live close together. And just seeing when Rockwell wanted to work with him, I was like, yeah, you have to. There's no doubt about it. I was like, we were talking about matchups and who wanted to wrestle, who didn't, who wanted to just appear. And I was adamant. I was like, look, I'll do whatever I just want to be there. I don't even have to put on my gear, but I would love to wrestle in that building with the chick magnets one more time. And they probably won't get in the ring. And I actually, at one point, believe it or not, I had Brian Sosha convinced to get into the ring. Tobin was the one that was like, I don't know, man, I don't want to get in the ring again. I respect that. You guys were, you don't really retire from independent wrestling, but they hung it up a long time ago and they stuck to it, which was admirable. And I think it really made, we talked about this the last time, Brady, when I was with you, that it really made us, I'm going to use the term legend, but I'm using it in context. It made us legendary in this area with these folks because we didn't keep doing it. I continued on with JJ and Right Coast Pro, but it was like carrying on the legacy, but we never soiled what the team of the Chick Magnets did in our last match, and Jim standing at the curtain with us. But when I talked to Jim about this one, he said, it's time, and I'd love to see it one more time. And we tossed it around. It just wasn't really in the cards. Mike was obviously with me, and he definitely got physical, and he was in some of the best shape I've seen him in at this stage of our lives. And I keep in pretty close contact with him. We had I think we had most of the locker room and our entire family convinced that Brian Sosha was going to do a secret run-in from the parking lot. And I really wish that was the case, but there was a legitimate, he calls the bare knuckle fighting championships, and we had him all set to come in. They run Friday nights. He was going to be tight. Jim's like, I'll put you guys wherever you need to be on the show. Ryan said, I'll put where you need to be. Just let us know. And about maybe, I think probably less than a month ago, they switched the show to Saturday night, the same night as ours, because they were Sturgis, South Carolina.
Yeah, Sturgis.
In front of a ton of people. And he just couldn't get out of it. I kept saying, who do I have to call? Who do I call? How do I call you out of work? Because I want you there. It was just so funny. But we had the family convinced he was coming, and I wish that was the case. Part of me wished that somehow he was working me and was going to be there. We had a nice video package lined up with him, and it worked out really well, I thought. But it was the best way we could get him to be involved in it. And he was so upset that he couldn't be there. He called me, I think it was the Wednesday before the show, last Wednesday, and he was going over like what he wanted to do and how he wanted to handle it. And he's like, I'm going to send this video package in. As soon as we get off the phone, I'm going to shoot it. He's like, what do you think? And I was like, I think it's amazing. And he was just, you could tell that he was real emotional. He was like, I can't believe I can't be there. He goes, you don't know how upset I am about this. And I was like, I can't say that I fully understand, but I know where you're coming from, So it was, it was, I guess in a long-winded way, I'm answering your question. It was by far the most emotional event that I've done. It wasn't, I don't even say draining. It was just all these feelings, like there was sadness, there was, happy, there was, relief that we got through it. And, bar one, pretty good injury, everybody came out of it pretty safe. I think Aiden Chambers really busted up his ankle. I haven't talked to him personally. I've been trying to catch up with him, but saw him Saturday night after the show. He was limping pretty good, but but still, biggest smile. And I've known him for years. We've wrestled each other all over the place, and he's biggest smile I've ever seen on his face, and the biggest hug when we were parting ways. And even with that kind of injury, and I think Mike Tobin told me it was pretty serious, that he may have been broken, but I didn't, I don't know for sure. I wouldn't doubt it. And
Wow.
the seriousness of that kind of injury, the way he was limping, and I know it was hurting him, he just never let it bother him. He was so happy to be there and be with the guys. And I think that's what the day was really all about, because the scope of it was a culmination of a documentary project that's been going on for I think almost 2 years. And I just love Ryan Cavana so much, that the current owner of ECWA, and where I can't wait to see where he takes it in the future. But I feel like going back to the past, it is given that confirmation that this is the oldest independent wrestling company in the United States. Jim ran the same town, essentially, a couple of different buildings, a couple of different locations within what we would call the town for, 40 years. And it's kind of unprecedented if you think about it. I mean, even the Mid-South run in the Coliseum wasn't anywhere near that long. And all these great places that the history is rich in the United States with wrestling, for sure. But I feel like now people that might not know Jim, or maybe didn't know him other than the Super 8 tournaments, which I think most wrestling fans, at least of that era, knew of him. There's a new era. There's a new generation of kids that have only kind of been weaned on that legend, if you will. And now this documentary will take, fans from the backyard in 1967 to this show in 2024, where I think somebody said somewhere, I read it, I can't, I'm quoting, and I don't want to quote, I'm saying things that I think I read, 6 generations of wrestlers. There were kids that I trained, there were kids that Jim trained, there were people that were started with Jim back in those days, there were people that came through the 70s, the 80s. I think every decade was like represented, if I'm not mistaken, if not close to it. And the matchups, the way that they were structured, the introductions, the entire show, I think the way that it culminated is just, my hat's off to Ryan for having this vision, and to Jim for agreeing to bring his magic to it. And because I feel like anytime he's around, or anytime he touches something, it's just magic, it's gold. And his fingerprints were all throughout the show, and it was just everything. There were certain, I can't wait, for me, I can't wait until it's released, because I want to see it from beginning to end. I couldn't see everything, obviously there were preparations to make and things to get ready for, but I saw a lot of it, and there wasn't anything on there that I thought it wasn't complete, just magic. I thought that everything that happened was great, but just probably the most emotional night of, it's hesitant to say of my life, because, I have twin girls, and that was, obviously when they were born, and, I have landmarks like meeting certain people, and, things happen in my life. But in terms of wrestling like that, yeah, it was pretty huge.
Wow. Yeah. So and you kind of touched on it. The difficulty in this kind of an interview, Mozart, is you're trying to tell a story, and a lot of people weren't there, so they get like an incomplete, almost like perspective of things. That's where I'm really excited for this documentary, and why I was really disappointed to miss the show, because it would have been like an opportunity to kind of see that again, and even learn things, and meet people that I hadn't had the opportunity to for the time that I was there. What what was so special about ECWA? Like, why is it that people still talk so fondly about it after all these years?
The camaraderie, the family. There was
Yeah.
the locker room is devoid of any ego, attitude, agenda. There's no one-upsmanship other than just the competitiveness of, everybody wants to have the best match. But when you work for Jim, one of the things that he teaches is that every match on the card has its purpose, whether it's the opening match. Jim, and we talked about this before, and I'm sure, Kathy, you know this. Jim doesn't talk, Brady, actually, Brady, you probably know this too. He doesn't refer to things as main event, curtain jerker. Those were terms that we weren't really, I don't want to say allowed to use, but he's like, that's not how I refer to it, because everybody on my show is important. You're the opener.
Yeah.
You're closing the first half, which he always said, and I felt good about this because I had that spot. I closed the first half. It's kind of like your quote unquote second main event, because you're closing the first half of the show.
Yeah.
Opening the first half of the show, and of course the finale, which is from a sports perspective. And I just had this conversation with Loki too, which was, he put this great spin on it, perspective. So the lineage of our business is carnivals, at shows, and shoots, catch wrestling. So we have to combine that in a way that we still look legitimate, but we're bringing some entertainment to the crowd. We're bringing a great entrance. We're bringing a great persona, as some would say, character. I never liked the term character because I feel like that's insinuating that we're acting, and I've heard that a lot. Oh, you guys are great actors. It's like, no. We're reactors. I don't know how to act. I don't know how to do anything. And I think even watching, like, I love all these great shows on TV now, and I take inspiration from these young unknown actors, like all the folks that are in House of the Dragon. If you watch a Game of Thrones, if you watch some of these shows, I used to start watching the show Evil, and these are all, like, to me, they're fairly unknown actors and actresses, but to me, they're not acting. It comes off as authentic. It comes off as, okay, they're reacting to a script they're given. Maybe now we work live without a net. We're not, as you guys know, we're not given a script per se. So when we're performing, we want to be as real as possible. So one of the things that Jim, what made ECWA was so special was flat out the one, and he's humble and gave credit where it's due, but the thing that made ECWA special is Jim Cadner. I mean, it would have never been what it was. His vision, his passion for creating something that made the fans want to come back month after month and buy a ticket. He took kids like me when I was a kid who had average charisma. I was an average athlete, maybe. But I had a passion to learn this, and I wanted to become more of a legitimate professional athlete. I wanted to be that reactor, as I'm learning things. He made it fun. It wasn't like a job. No, this is not a job for me. I have a full-time job. I didn't want to do wrestling as a full-time job because, actually, one of the greatest pieces of advice I ever got was from Lance Simon Diamond. He was my first trainer. He said, "You guys have fun now while you're on Independence. If you ever go anywhere else where it becomes a full-time job, you got to do exactly what they tell you, when they tell you, how they tell you. It's not always fun." It's like, okay. And he was just at the time about to, I think he'd maybe done a few things for ECW. I think he was about to leave, ECWA and the training center and go full time with ECW. So, he knew what he was talking about. He had done some work for WWF, WWE. So, as I got more experience, I understand, like, when you go to those companies, it's, hey, you're doing this. Doesn't matter what your character is or your gimmick or your persona anywhere else. This is what we need you to do. And Jim always made it fun. There's not a show that I ever did, and he would call me up. He did this with a lot of us, and he did it for different reasons. I feel like he left a piece of himself, a piece of his knowledge, which is it's brilliant if you think about it. he didn't leave it with just me or with just Loki or with just Mega or whoever it was that he was giving a call to and having a chat with that particular evening. He left it with everybody. And he was so good at understanding what level people were on. He left a higher level of knowledge with Loki, who's worked all around the world. We talked about that the other day. And Keith said to me, you could be exactly where I'm at. And I went, I can't do anything that you can do in the ring. And it doesn't matter. You can still do whatever you want to do. And that's why I'm 52. It doesn't matter. You come from Jim too. And it was like this whole inspirational thing where Jim left different levels of knowledge with different people. He taught JJ, obviously, how to book a show, how to make matchups, who's going to be good with each other. Because we started sitting down doing the first RCP show, and he's like, well, I want to put this person with this person. I'm like, yeah, and I think this person would work well. I mean, man, if we had gone with what we wanted to do, it would have been like a crap fest, it just, and then he learned really quickly, okay, so what would Jim do? How would we put people together? Who would be a good match? And Jim was a master of that too. So you never got outclassed. You never got outmatched. You learned from people. And if he asked somebody to be in a ring with me or me to be in a ring with somebody else, it would be for a reason. So I think the thing, I could go on forever, Brady, but Jim made it special. But it was that respect that he garnered from everybody that just kind of brought it like full circle and made it just, I never once did I feel uncomfortable, not have a good time, didn't really dig what I was doing. Like every time I came to a show, I was fired up for whatever was going on that night.
One of the listeners, Mozart, they want to know your favorite moment in the ECWA over your long career.
For the whole career?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. In the ECWA. Let me think about it for a minute.
Sure.
There's so many. I mean, I got to be at the Hall of Fame. I was inducted in 2006, I think. I think for me, other than this night, because this is one of those things where if you've ever heard somebody, to the listener, if you ever heard somebody say, who's the person you love most? And it's like your significant other, but it's kind of always like your kids are unspoken. You don't ever have to say, well, but my kids, the kids, and then it's like everybody else, right? At least that's how I look at it, right? So other than the other night with this really special event, we talked about it too with Chase Del Monte. The first time that we closed the show, we'd done everything on the show. I can't remember the year. I want to say 2008, maybe 9. I think 2008 gone maybe it was 2009. Like it was a January 2009, I think it was. We did a hair versus career match because I wanted to cut my hair off, and the boys wouldn't let me do it outside of the ring. So we did a hair versus career match against Chase Del Monte and Matt and Brian Logan, the Chick Magnets, me, Soch, and Tobin. I think that was my favorite moment because we had reached the finale of the show. We had proved we could do anything else on the card. We were great utility guys. We opened, we closed, we had every single spot on the show, but we never had the chance. We had done cage matches. All that stuff is special. But when we got to close the show with those three guys, I think that's probably still stands out to me the most. It was insane. Huge crowd, like people. I don't think anybody in the building believed I was going to lose my hair. It was kind of like a hallmark at the time. And
Sure.
But at the same time, were the Logans really going to never be in ECWA again? It was a really huge question mark, and we really had people. I don't think anybody could really guess the outcome of the match. I pulled myself out of it and made it and I try to do this a lot of times too. I pull myself out of the matchup and try to think of it as a legitimate contest. And I didn't want to think about what we knew we had to get to because I just wanted to be in the moment like we were getting there. All three of us me and Sosha both got injuries in the match. I came in injured. My knee blew out the very first sequence, the very first spot we tried to do. My knee blew out.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Tobin was just coming off of an injury and he was really kind of unsure of himself. He just carried us through the match like the greatest professional. Sosha got injured and maybe halfway, 3/4 of the way through, he shattered his ankle. And we're all hobbling through this match, and Tobin's just like, everything that, you want to talk about. Was it real? Yeah, it was really real, because nothing that was discussed went down the way it was discussed. We had to work around injuries, and I preached it to kids after I had the real world experience when I started teaching. But I don't think if I had ever had to do it, that you can actually articulate it the way it needs to be done. It's now just reacting. Now you're back to reacting, right? We send word to the referee, hey, I'm hurt. Mozart's legitimately hurt. His knee is done. The Logan brothers, Chase, knew right away what to do. We kept me in and out of the ring real quick, real short bursts, and like I said, Tobin was the workhorse. So that's why that sticks out to me.
It's quite the memory. Quite the memory for sure. Howard, you had a question for Mozart Fontaine.
Yeah, I grew up watching, started watching wrestling about 82, 83. So it was still territorial at the time, and I really fell in love with Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. And I thought, just from your perspective, a fantasy booking, if you will, you're in the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia, and in their prime, Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson against you and a partner of your choice. Who are you picking? And give us the finish.
Oh, man. Well, first of all, Patty, if anybody watches me, I still to this day use the DDT. I think I probably owe Tully money for using, 3/4 of his moves, if not more than that. So, yeah, they were two of my favorites growing up. But if I'm working and they're working their traditional heel roll and I had to work, so many people from that Mid-Atlantic Championship era.
It doesn't have to be from Mid-Atlantic, just a partner of your choice.
Partner of my choice. I'll be honest with you. I'd love it to be either me or Sosha or me or Tobin. But if I'm going national, it's got to be Steamboat. He's always been like a hero. And I think if we're finishing, I think I would just love to take the Gourd Buster. I love that movie. I was so sad when he pulled it out of. And I follow one of his pages, and Arn had some old footage up of him doing the Gourd Buster. And I must have watched it for like 15 minutes, like the same move over and over again. I was like, wow. Because it's funny, we used to, as kids, we would mimic, I guess what they would call backyard now, but we truly were just really young kids trying to mimic. Maybe not even teenagers yet. And one of the kids up the street, he was a little skinny kid. He always wanted to be Arn Anderson. All right, okay, you can be Arn Anderson. I want to do the Gourd Buster. So we watched it on TV, and we thought we learned how to do it. And he took my cousin and dropped him right on his face. And I was like, well, there we go. I'm not doing that. I'll be watching from ringside. Yeah. But yeah, I think it would be cool to take that and have them like, oh man, I could see it now. I could just see like, I'd be the weak link. Obviously, I'd be the non veteran on the good guy side, and
you'd be in peril.
Yes, yeah, I'd be the face in peril. Yeah, and I could just see Steamboat firing up on him, but not maybe the referee didn't see the tag. I always love that when we worked as heels for years, and I always love when the referee didn't see the tag. And I tell you, who helped me master that was Mr. La La, and I mastered that early on working with Mark and Jay Briscoe. We would have them get the tag and the referee not see it, and it's an old trick. We weren't.
Old as the sport itself, and only the good guys got caught not getting the tag.
Exactly.
And it infuriated me.
Well, we would double it up, and I don't know. I don't know where I saw it. It was probably Lala's idea, but they would get the tag. They would get the legitimate tag. The crowd would see it, and I could see something like this in that fantasy booking. They'd get the legitimate tag. The crowd sees it. They know who should be legal, but the referee's getting them out. And while the referee's getting them out, we're doing the old, hand smack in the air, like that.
Right.
And where the referee turns around and says, well, but I heard the tag. So then we get it's like a triple whammy. They don't see the baby face get tagged in. The unofficial heel gets in, puts on some steam. Well, he gets put back out, and the other fresh guy, we're fresh while they're not. And it was such a brilliant thing, and I was like, wow, this is just classic. Like the crowd hated us because they were just kids, at the time we were doing that. And it's like these two, I looked much older. I was 10 years older than I am over 10 years older, but I was over 10 years older than them, and well, a few years older than that. So these men are beating up these teenage boys, and the crowd just hated it. But that would be a cool fantasy booking. And you're speaking about the Omni Arena. That's when I fell in love with wrestling. That's when I found it for myself, because my grandmother used to watch all the old Capital Wrestling, the WWF stuff, and Superstar Graham. I was so familiar with Superstar Graham and Dusty Rhodes from the Madison Square Garden cards. And when I discovered it a couple of years later on my own, it was Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, and it was Hot Rod and Ole Anderson and Jack Briscoe, and they were kind of fading. Well, Hot Rod was getting ready to go national at that point, but Briscoe was kind of fading off the scene a bit, and Gordon Soley was calling the matches. So that was a cool question. I appreciate that.
You mentioned Mr. Ulala, and it's funny in a lot of ways, because I think he's the only guy from that old roster that still is doing it in ECWA. He's kind of become an ambassador. I say all the time, he's like a bucket list guy. Like, how many people come up in the independents or even like televised guys? They all want to have a match with Mr. Ulala. What's so special about him that he's kind of stayed endearing and on top like that?
I don't know anybody that can be that completely buffoonish and silly,
right,
and still be a threat in the ring. You know what I mean? So, and I told him all the time. I said, I was like, hey man, we just talked about the other night. It was 18 years ago that he injured his eye, and
wow.
he was really never the same in the ring after that. He could hide it, a little bit, but well, I mean, before that, he could just work his magic around the ring, and never had to really wrestle. He could just, entertain the crowd with the buffoonery. But I think that's what's so special is, especially when you go back to his prime and his heyday, he was a threat, So when he did wrestle somebody, it's like, ooh, well, maybe he's going to turn it on and he might actually beat them. As silly as he was, like he couldn't beat the ring steps getting up on them, or beat the ring ropes, he'd trip and hang up in them. And I'll tell you, from first-hand experience and being, you never know what he was going to do, and it would just make me laugh. I would literally have to turn away. I actually had to make it part of the shtick, because I just could not laugh when he's walking up the ring and slipping and falling, or he's like, stand out of the way, I'm going to catapult in, and I stand out of the way, and he goes to catapult in and hangs himself all up in the ropes, and of course I run over and I'm trying to help him out of the ropes, and it gets even worse, but I couldn't not laugh. So it was almost like one of those things where I'm like, hey, if I start laughing, you got to react and get mad at me, you know what I mean? And we kind of have a little dissension for a minute. So yeah, I think that's what makes him so special. Always, and that's, again, going back to Jim's genius, that's what he did with the chick magnets in a way. And if you're familiar with the valedictorians, Rob Echoes, Robert Stone, Billy Bax, who I got to spend some time with the other night. Billy Bax is as legitimate as a ring as anybody. The guy can shoot. He's got a really great amateur background. He's the nicest guy in the world, but he could work his circles around just about anybody. Rob was also just really, really great in the ring. But they had this silly shtick, and they came to the ring, and the crowd's like, oh, these guys are fools. But once the bell rang, it was on. And that's what Jim said about the chick magnets. He's like, look, you guys can all wrestle. He's like, but go into the ring. Remember, we went through this evolution in the show where he's like, I'm going to make every entrance a spectacle. When we had the Nigerian Nightmares, the lights would go out, and they come out and scare the kids half to death. And the chick magnets, we danced, and we didn't do it very well, and that became a very entertaining shtick. But once the bell rang and we got into the ring, we were credible enough to start working with some of the guys who were on a higher level than us, and it became believable that, at one point, obviously Tobin made it, to the Super 8 tournament. He got to be in a Super 8. So we had this credibility, and Socia had this toughness that people would would buy. And, you know, I had this like kind of ring general-ish kind of savviness that, and I was learning from everybody how to do it. It wasn't really the case at the time, but I could portray that ring general, and I was pulling the guys together and kind of like the glue of the team. And so we all three had these real distinct roles. Bax and Echoes had distinct roles. You know, Bax was the straight guy. You know, Echoes was kind of like his foil. You know, or actually the other way around. You know, Echoes was the straight guy. Bax was his foil, kind of always, you know, messing something up or doing something silly in one of the vignettes or live pieces. You know, when they had a microphone. And I think that's where Ooh La La kind of like inspired everybody. It's like, if this guy can go out and be that silly, which draws the people in and draws the kids in and draws the fans in.
Yeah.
But when the bell rings, and Jim always told me this, Jim, almost every conversation we've ever had, at some point he's like, you know, Roof, it's always, it still says wrestling on the marquee. It's still wrestling. If you can't give them some wrestling, then you've kind of not, you know, I guess not really done your job, you know. And you know that you don't have to be a, you know, a Kurt Angle or a Jerry Briscoe or Low-Key to be able to wrestle, but you should be able to portray a degree of toughness. Like, we should be the guys that, you know, or otherwise we should be sitting in the crowd. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a conversation I had a few times over the years with some of the guys that I trained. I was like, look, you know, if you can't make it look believable and the people can see that you're kind of phoning it in, or you're just not in good enough shape to do it or something, then what kind of differentiates you from somebody who's buying a ticket? They're paying to be entertained, and they're not paying to see a bad show. Jim's personas, I mean, you talk about personas, I mean, some of the greatest of all time. I mean, the Cheetah Master, I talked about him. But Boogie Woogie Brown, we did a huge tribute to Boogie Woogie Brown. We had the Boogie Woogie Brown Battle Royal, and I knew Boogie personally, and I've wrestled him several times. I traveled with him, and he was just the sweetest guy, but he had such a charisma that you couldn't teach. He could, you know, one of his favorites, and you can see it when you watch him, was Dusty Rhodes, you know. Bobo Brazil, he was like a combination of those two guys, and he made it his own. But he would say to me some nights, he'd be like, you know, we'd be going to shows and driving together, and or if we didn't, we'd meet up, and he'd say, well, it's 100 degrees out here. These people are sweaty. They don't want to be in the heat, but they want to be entertained. So I'm just going to be in the middle, baby. You come find me. And he would never leave the middle of the ring, and the place would come unglued, you know. Well, what are we going to do? No worry, but just come find me. You know, just come find me out there, baby. I'm going to be in the corner, baby. You come find me. We were joking about that the other night. I said, I don't think I ever did a match with Boogie where he didn't tell me to come find him. But when you create a persona like that,
Yeah.
And Boogie was an athlete. He was a really good basketball player. But by the time he started wrestling, you know, he was a little heavier. He was a big dude, but he still moved like a cat. I mean, there was still some athleticism. There was still believability. If he was throwing jabs or he was throwing an elbow or a big elbow drop, I mean, it used to scare me coming down on me. And I'm like, oh, God, here it comes. Here it comes. Oh, okay. All right. I'm alive, you know. And he made it look effortless and brutal. But I think that's the key, is creating something special. And that's why I go back to Jim. He had a vision, and he would lay it out for you, and he would get your buy-in, you know. We talked about this before, the first time that, you know, he called me up and said, hey, I got this idea, you know, I really want to keep Socha and Tobin on the card. They're great guys, and, you know, you're kind of like floundering right now. We're trying to find what you're doing, you know, and I got an idea. I want you to be the chick magnet. You're going to wear these, like, cheap little bow ties, nothing else. No suspenders, no coat. I just want a bow tie. And I was like, I don't know, Jim. I mean, it's been done before. You know, I kind of wanted to be taken seriously. Oh, no, you will. You'll be taken seriously. but I need you to grab the people's attention, and I need you to look like a unified tag team. Okay, I'm in. And I told you the story before. I jumped off the phone. I called those guys. Hey, we have to use Sharp Dressed Man because at the time when I'm growing up, it's Jimmy Garvin. It's
Yeah.
Fantastics, and I love these guys. And I'm like, oh, if we're gonna do this, let's do it right. So yeah, the things that he created and the way he inspired people to do. Not only did he, it's not that he inspired them to do what he wanted. He inspired us to do what we wanted in a way that would sell to the public. So I didn't even know what I wanted to do. And once I go out there with this bow tie on and have a blast, and I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I just grabbed the people's attention, but I can still be this, nasty heel like I wanted to be, Now we're on to something. So yeah, it was cool.
No, that is cool. So with this whole focus on Jim Kettner and everything, it just keeps going back to me how beloved he was and how loyal everybody was to him. What set Jim apart? What made him the guy that everybody could trust? Because promoters and wrestlers don't usually, but for Jim, it was always different.
Because he respected the boys. Because he
Okay.
respected, he hired people in for a purpose. He had a vision for his show, and he would hire them in with and being a man of his word, he created opportunities where maybe other promoters couldn't, especially after he became pretty much world renowned for the Super 8. And I mean, you can go down a list of guys, from AJ to Dragon, Loki. I mean, these guys all came through Jim's show, and that's probably the first time for them. Although they were red hot, and he knew who he wanted. He knew who he wanted, and he knew who was going to be propelled to the next level. He had a vision for that tournament. He had a knack for seeing who was about to break, and he gave them the platform to break nationally. For the local guys and for guys who might just come, and I know a ton of people always wanted to work on the show. It was because of the respect that he garnered. I just, again, Loki said it to me the other day. He was like, all these people are here for Jim. This is what respect commands. This is what respect does. One call and folks are like, hey, I'm here. Chris Daniels, he's there. He's like, yeah, I'm in. Guys at that level are like, yeah, cool. It's Jim. I'm going to be there. When that's all I need to know. And they clear their calendar and they make it happen. And I had heard through the grapevine and even from Jim himself, there was a lot of guys that they reached out to that really wanted to be there, but for one reason or another, contractually, they couldn't be, But the respect that wanted to be there kind of speaks to, and I think it's just what it is. Like, he's just a stand-up guy who knows, I think he knows more about wrestling than anybody living on the planet right now. I mean, it's unbelievable how much that he knows. And it's not because he's arrogant or not because he thinks he knows it. It's because he's been around the business for so long and learned from masters. I mean, when you sit when he sat in the locker room and he's talked to Arnie Scotland and Ernie Ladd and Professor Toru Tanaka. I mean, these are guys that were doing this at a high level before there was pay-per-views and premiere events and huge marketing machines behind them. They were doing it at a grassroots level, becoming national and world famous, which I don't think could happen in today's world. Like, if you didn't have this mass marketing media and they did it on talent, and they did it on learning the craft from the people before him. And I feel like the lineage that Jim has, learning wrestling, it just makes him really respected. But I think, to go back to the main thing is because he's a stand-up guy, and a handshake with him is worth more than somebody's written contract. I mean, if he shakes your hand and he tells you, this is what we're going to do, I have a 6-month program, this is what we're going to do, it's going to happen. and it's probably going to turn out better than he laid it out in a conversation or on paper. So that to me is what makes him special. And he cares. He cares about all the guys. Like, he cares about their outside life. Like, one of the first things when I started training under him, he brought us into the office. It was me and Johnny Max, a couple other guys, and we were all training together. And he said, I don't want you guys to be under any, illusions that you're going to be big stars. If it happens and we can get you there, then that's great. But understand the first thing is your family. A wrestling show is always going to be there. You take care of your private life first, and he's been there for me through a ton of personal, lows and highs. And I'm sure for a lot of the other guys, I've heard similar stories. Like, I called Tim and I had this conversation. It wasn't even about wrestling, and I come off the phone with some type of advice where I can, put it into my personal life. And again, it's just the quality of human being, the stand up, but the knowledge of wrestling is second to none, for sure.
No, absolutely, for sure. So you mentioned the Super 8 tournament, and I think for people outside the area, especially, the Super 8 tournament helped to put ECWA on the map, certainly on the independent scene. What was it that set that tournament apart, from other stuff that were happening on the indies? Because it really did stand out.
It was what set it apart was Jim's foresight, his vision, because everybody was handpicked for a reason. He picked guys that would maybe be great openers, great guys to move to a second round. But when he picked the guys who would end up being the stars of the tournament, he saw something. He saw most of them had the ability to go to the next level, to go to a national company or an international company. So once the tournament started picking up steam, his vision, he had the Hardy Boys on before they were really huge. He had, tons of guys, Daniels. He had, AJ, Bobby Roode. I mean, all these guys, he saw something in them by what they said. And I asked him one time, I said, what did you look for when you were choosing just a competitor in general, and specifically a top tier guy, a finalist or a winner? And he said, well, when they would send me their tapes, I needed to see everything. I needed to see them delivering moves, taking moves, them selling for the opponent, them playing the crowd, every aspect. And if the guys would send this well-rounded video package, or they came highly recommended from somebody who we already respected and trusted, then they kind of had his ear and his eye a little bit. But it was his foresight into, when you saw the Super 8 tournament, you knew you were seeing a guy who was going to break out and do something on a national level, or a few guys from that tournament. And the rest of the guys were still going to captivate you. So they would become local heroes. They would go back to their home promotion as local heroes, or they could come back to Delaware, to Wilmington or Newark, and be revered as heroes here because they were in the tournament. So a lot of the guys would come back 2 or 3 times, the following year that they performed, because they were great for the card. They could teach somebody like me or another young guy something, and they'd come back. And, again, nothing was ever done without a purpose, but the excitement that it generated, it was, a little bit of history. It was kind of started to crown a television champion, I believe. I think it was it was before he had a Mid-Atlantic champ.
Yeah.
And of course, Simon Diamond, who's as crazy as ever. I just love him so much. He was in Jim's ear. He was really into Japan and the best of the Super Juniors. And he's like, we should do a tournament like that. That's how we should do. And he was in Jim's ear, and Jim was like, I need something different. So Jim was never afraid to take somebody's idea and refine it. And if I remember correctly, it was Simon Diamond who put the bug in Jim's ear about a tournament, and then he's like, all right, you know, he always told me he'd need his blood pressure medicine when Simon Diamond was around. He drove me up the wall, you know. That him and Cheetah Master, yeah. He said they drove me up the wall. I needed my blood pressure medicine, but the creativity that they brought to him and he brought out of them and brought to them, you know, to create some magical stuff. So I think it was just right place, right time, creating the tournament. But that's what made it special was his ability to see the next big star. The people knew they were going to get something special.
Well, we're almost out of time for tonight, and it's hard to believe that you've been on again for an hour. Like seriously, like that felt like about 10 minutes. Like I'm not even kidding about that.
I didn't even get in that. I didn't even get to talk about me, Brady. No, I'm only kidding.
I know. Listen, last time I said we got to bring you back real soon, and I think I waited almost a year and a half, and I feel terrible about that. We have to do it sooner. We have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what we should do? We have
What's
to,
that?
and it's going to be so hard to do it, but we got to get Sosha on here because his perspective is probably, and Tobin too, but I know you talked to Tobin and he was awesome.
Yeah.
But we have to get him because his perspective is very unique, and I'd do it with the three of us, you know. We actually do.
I would love that.
You know, I mean, I would think that would be awesome, but man, I appreciate you because I was so excited when you reached out yesterday because I just want to say that this show, the reunion show, and I'm sorry you weren't there, Brady, by the way. I meant to say that first and foremost because I missed you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until about noontime, and I was like, "Oh, Brady should be showing up." And then we get super busy. I'm like, "Oh, he should be here." And I was like, "Oh man, I guess he's not coming." you know. But I thought to myself when you reached out, I can't even begin to cover how special this was. And if you are a fan of wrestling at all in any way, shape, or form, whether it's TV, independent, you know, casual, when this show becomes available, and I don't know when, I think Ryan said it'll be part of a documentary, but probably later in the year, I would go out of my way to watch this because the emotion that comes across the guardrail and hits the people right in the face. I mean, I talked to fans afterwards, and I've never seen so many smiles at a wrestling show, so many hugs, so many thank yous, so many, hey, can I grab you for a minute? Like you didn't even have time to talk to everybody, you know? It was really special.
Do you think there's a chance we'll get another show like this, or was this one of a kind?
I think it was one of a kind, but what I think and my hope is, and I talked to Ryan, is man, your future looks good, man. If you have the guy has the right frame of mind, he's the right guy to take the reins. He respects the history. He's got a great mind for moving in the future. He's got a really talented roster. He's got great characters, and he's got a percentage of the roster that's really good in the ring. So he's got some key guys you can lean on, but he's got a lot of good characters. And I told him, I mean, if there's any way I can be a part of that, like it doesn't have to be in the ring. You know, if I can help somebody or help you, let me know, because I think that it really inspired me to be around wrestling again. You know, every couple of years I think, wow, I'm done. You know, when Right Coast Pro closed, and you know, and JJ was there too, by the way. It was tremendous to see him and Lisa, who owned Right Coast Pro. But we go way back. To me, when you look at the history of wrestling in Delaware, he's chronicling that, and that's important to me because you have a history of wrestling on other territories. This wasn't necessarily a territory, but I think the scope when it's all said and done and history's written, you'll look back at ECWA as just as important as a world-class championship wrestling, as a Georgia championship wrestling, as Memphis, or it'll be just as important as one of those huge territories, because it had its place and a lot of stars came out of there.
Oh, for sure, a whole lot. You heard that, Howard. He got the bug. He got bit. So he's not done yet. No, that's great. That's great.
Now I just have to find somebody to wrestle me, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Mozart, thank you for the time. It really meant a lot. We're going to try and do this again real soon. And you really brought back a lot of great memories for me, and I feel like, if I couldn't be there on Saturday, at least I got that perspective from you.
Yeah, keep in touch because I appreciate what you're doing. These podcasts are important. The work that
Sure.
you do with commentary and keeping the people up to date, because independent wrestling is a really important part of wrestling history, and I think ECWA should be at the forefront of that. It's the oldest promotion. I think it's time to reaffirm its place as the independent promotion. You got the right guy at the helm. You've got the right talent behind the scenes. Jim's a phone call away. Although he says, "Oh, I can't wait till it's over. I can't wait. I'm going crazy." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. He's got the bug, but yeah." But I appreciate everything that you guys do, and I was beyond excited to be on here tonight. You can tell I love to talk. Fitz, I love you. I'm sorry, I don't know where you went, but
Happy, brother. Really, so happy to have you. It's been great, and yeah, we'll definitely talk soon.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, there you have it. That was ECWA legend Mozart Fontaine, and no, you're great.